the conferences, all the TED Talks all around the world that have all had to go virtual, and then speakers have dropped out or whatever. Like, are we reaching out as speakers, and are we messaging? Are we offering our time? You know, is there a non-profit in the area and you're a marketing expert that you could message and say, hey, I'll do a lunch and learn for your team. Like, you want to raise money, you want to market, it's all the same principles. Like, I'll just do a lunch and learn for you. Like, do 10 lunch and learns, speak at 10 schools, DM 10 conferences around the world, DM 10 TEDx events that are running. I don't know, where else could people go? DM 10, local businesses and just offer your expertise just because they're in your neighborhood. And out of those 50 opportunities, I would eat my hat, my coffee cup, if none of them came back in a fruitful way in the next 12 months.
Influencing the thinking of billions of people every year. They are the thought leaders, educators, and extroverts. Meet the minds behind the microphones, the experts who share from the stage, encouraging us to think differently, do more, and ultimately strive to succeed. Welcome to the #KeynoteSpeakershow. Here's your host, Jonathan Creek. Josh, welcome to the #KeynoteSpeakershow.
Hey mate, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Very good. Again, troubles with the intro, but I'll have to put my hand up. It was my fault this time.
What did you do?
I clicked the wrong button.
Yeah, that'll get you every time.
Man, I need a producer. I need something. It can't be this hard. Anyway, it's all part of the fun.
What platform do you use?
I'm using Ecamm Live, and I have tried a few, but I find Ecamm Live, well, this is without my most recent disaster, which was just 30 seconds ago. I've usually find Ecamm Live pretty simple and not too overcomplicated. So maybe I need to do more training.
Yeah, interesting. I use StreamYard. We've done 32 eps of a LinkedIn Live show, which goes out on Facebook too. StreamYard's a good one too. If people are ever interested in doing this for themselves, it's a gem. I haven't had any problems with them.
StreamYard?
Yeah, StreamYard. It's cool. It's
Yeah.
like a BC startup. Really friendly and a really cool LinkedIn community group. But yeah, so anyway, that's a bit of a side note, but that's a cool one. I'll have to check out Ecamm Live too.
Well, that's what we're about here. We're gathering speakers. Speakers do like to broadcast. They do like to send their message. It's part of what drives them.
Yep.
And, I'm actually thinking that we should have I should run an episode where we just talk tech, because I spend a lot of time answering tech questions.
Yeah.
And so, it'd be an interesting discussion to see what people are using. I know a friend of mine in Canada uses StreamYard. So you're the
cool.
second person in a week who's brought it up. So
Yeah.
possibly I will go and check it out for sure.
Cool.
Now,
Cool, man.
Josh, jumping into it, you're a 2 times TED speaker. You've run a number of businesses. You're an interesting guy. You're a shaker and mover. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And obviously, of course, you were roped into this by Sharon, who was on the show a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's good. Sharon's been doing some work with me and campus for a little while now, since about September last year. So nearly 9 months. Yeah, he's a great guy with a lot of love to share for the world. So it was really nice when he introduced me to you. I think we're always telling students, we do a lot of work in the leadership space, particularly with universities. And we currently work with about 28 unis around Australia, and nearly 11,000 students have been through workshops and talks and things like that. So one of the big things we're always telling students is, like, life is a human game, and it's all about relationships and who you know and connections and community. So yeah, it's always nice when great people know great people and they introduce you and you get the chance to share some of your lessons and learnings and mistakes with someone else. So really happy to dig into anything today, and hopefully I can add some value to everyone who's listening.
Oh, look, I've got no doubt.
Cool.
Campus consultancy is a great concept. It's being
Thanks.
executed excellently. As someone who has links into one of the big universities here in Melbourne, I know the influence that it has. So congratulations to you.
Thanks,
on
mate.
that. And I think, they say that, sometimes accidental timing can be perfect. And
I like that. It's a good one.
I don't think there's a tougher time at the moment for students than what we're going through with isolation. I know there's a lot of people who've lost jobs. There's a lot of people who've lost loved ones.
Yeah.
But students, and in particular, probably foreign students who are here, um, and really not being able to work because they'd fill a lot of those jobs that have been shut down in recent times, yet paying what you'd say is pretty significant fees to be here, and the pressure and the anxiety, and then not being able to see their families, it just all builds up. And the sort of people that they'd be looking towards, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is probably leaders in their immediate social circle. And that's the sort of people you work with, right?
Yeah, it is. And yeah, potentially one of those things. I think it's interesting. I think for say students, if you're listening in, and a lot of my stuff is students, but I know your audience is largely speakers, so maybe I can target it there, and maybe the role of how can a speaker, if this is something that you care about, how could you address this? Of students are looking, and I think the question is, in a digital world where say we're living at home, we've lost the sense of, in a lot of ways, for the short term, we've lost that sort of sense of touch. We're not out in the world shaking hands with people. We don't really have that same sense of taste and smell. We're not in restaurants and cafes like brewing fresh coffee, even though you might do that at home. But the two senses that link us to the outside world right now are sight and sound. And so what an individual on a student level or any level can control is what they look at all day long and what goes into their ears. And for an example, you could be looking at the news and seeing how many people are sick every day. And I would say that that's probably the best way to increase your level of anxiety if you tried. You could be looking at online shopping platforms that say the solution is only one click and one buy away. You can be listening to examples of people losing their jobs, or you can change that around and go, it's empathy, but it's the state of the world. What can I do to make things better? And I think our role is, whether it's speakers, presenters, facilitators, people who run businesses, people who put content out in the world, is to be a positive voice. And while I think people want empathy and they want understanding, they also want competence. And so if we can put out things right now that help people in tangible ways, I think that can be a really valuable way that we can serve, and we can use our voice such that if they watch us with their eyes or listen to us on podcasts, that's a good use of their time. And so to give you one really tangible thing, if you're a student out there or a young person and you've lost your job, or you're looking for a job, or you're about to enter the graduate field, there are free online virtual internships through a company called Inside Sherpa. They're amazing. You can go and do a virtual internship for free with KPMG or JP Morgan Chase or BCG or a million other companies. Free. And put that on your resume and your LinkedIn. You can go to Seek Volunteering, and there are tens of thousands of volunteering roles. You can sort by city, sort by sector. If you want to work with an animal charity in Brisbane, there's roles there for photographers, for people who drive cars, for people who do admin. So if it's virtual internship, you can also go out and do some volunteering that's skill-based, that'll help you get a job in the future. Or the third thing is I'd really be leaning into the Facebook Lives, the YouTubes, the podcasts, the free Audible subscriptions, the free LinkedIn Premium subscriptions and LinkedIn Learning. There's so much online that you can do to say, I might not get out of COVID better than when I entered. I think that would be naive to say that for everybody. But you will come out stronger if and only if we use this time to develop and flex a bit of muscle on, even if times are tough, what can we control? I think what we can control is what goes in our eyes and in our ears and how we use our time during the day. We're going to sit around complaining about our situation, or are we going to do that for 2 weeks, get through some Netflix and a couple of tubs of chocolate chip ice cream, and then on the other side of that go, all right, it's time to do something proactive about it, such as do an online internship, do some volunteering, or jump on and do some extra learning to set yourself up for whatever's next.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail right on the head. I was on a Facebook Live late last week after I've gone back to consuming a bit of Gary Vee, which I haven't done for a while.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people are into Gary. I overdosed on him in the early 2010s, but
Oh yeah, nice.
there was something he posted. I was watching TikTok, I think, with one of my daughters, and he came on and
Mm-hmm.
he was saying, "Look, if you're down, if you feel stuck, just make something.
Yeah,
Just make
such good
something.
advice.
Even if it's making greater knowledge in your brain, if it's making videos, if it's making anything,
Anything.
just make. That's the word. Just make, and it'll get you moving. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about here is, if you're a photographer, go and volunteer and build up your catalog.
Bingo.
If you're struggling for more information, go to YouTube and learn about stuff.
Yeah.
But don't sit there and spend your days, sorry, where you get to 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon and then you beat yourself up all over again because you've done nothing productive all day. And that's
Yeah,
the word. That word productive is key. If you look, I'm not saying we're going to be fixing all mental health issues in the world just by doing this, but it can, and for most people, it will make you feel better if you achieve something productive by the end of the day. Do something, and it will really push you forward.
100%. I love that. I think that's spot on. And if you just look at where the words come from, I mean, every speaker, knowing your audience of speakers, you get this question, and it's such a weird one because you, on one side, want to be grateful for the appreciation, but you also want to shed light on it, or at least I know I do. Every speaker's been asked this question, guaranteed. Well, how did you get so good at public speaking, and/or, oh, were you just always a good public speaker? And no one is. Like, that's not how it works. I was born in an English speaking country, couldn't learn English, figured it out. But if I was born in any other country, I would have learnt that language. Like, I wasn't born as a public speaker. And one of the things that people always ask is like, how did you get so confident? How did you get competent at this? And the word, like, and the idea of that confidence comes from doing it over and over again, like the doing, the making. And often I think what we're looking for is we want to feel good. We want to have the emotion of doing something without actually doing the work. Or we want to feel motivated. It's a big thing that's in the university sector right now. Students are like, I'm not motivated. They want to feel motivated before they do the thing. But if you look at where the words come from, the root word of emotion and the root word of motivation is the same thing. It's a Latin word and it means to move. Movement creates emotion. Movement creates motivation. You get up in the morning, you don't want to exercise. You don't all of a sudden get super motivated lying in bed when it's raining outside. You get up, you put your runners on, you go for a walk or walk the dog, or when the gyms reopen, you go to the gym, and then afterwards you feel better. Like the emotion comes after the action, not before. And I think this idea of when we've lost and we've been restricted in a lot of ways, if we want to change things, it comes through action even when we don't feel like it. And then you create something, you make a video, you put some photos out, you do some pottery, you do some coloring in, you write in a journal, like physically moving and getting things flowing. For me, at least, I've never done something that I know is good for me, and then at the end of it, felt worse. Like every time I exercise, I feel better afterwards. Every time I call a loved one, I feel better afterwards. So I think it's that impetus to act, which, yeah, I love Gary as well, and I think that's so much part of his message. He always says like, doing is better than reading.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty blunt way of saying it, but yeah, rather than asking someone else to motivate you, it's like do something and then see that and feel that you feel more motivated as a result.
Yeah, I think it's funny. It can be boiled down to things that are so simple, yet
Mm.
at the time when you're stuck, it's so complex. I mean, the
Yeah,
one that I love and my grandfather used to say it to me. He used to say, "Work works.
work works. I love that. That's brilliant.
Work works. If you're in trouble, work works." And
Work works.
that's so simple. Yet if you boil it down and have it in your arsenal and something that you respond to, then yeah, hopefully it's enough to get you up and motivated. Look, I must admit, at the start of the lockdown, being in the speaking industry, recently really pushed my business right over to that space.
Yeah.
Um, so a much bigger slice of the pie than what it was in previous years. And then all of a sudden it's shut down. And there's a lot of talk of, oh, well, just shift yourself to virtual, you know, reach out, offer something a little bit different that matches virtual and all that sort of stuff. And that's
Yep.
fine. But my love is actually being in the room. My
Yeah, of
love is
course.
actually connecting with people. And, rather than, I sulked for a little bit, but I had my birthday in isolation. So I drew the line in
Happy
the sand.
delayed birthday.
Yeah, thank you. I drew a line in the sand that I wasn't going to sulk on my birthday. And,
Beautiful.
so that was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 days. Um, and then I've embraced isolation. I've had my wife and kids at home here. And I thought,
Cool.
I'm going to embrace this time of being together. I might not be as productive as I normally was, but there aren't as many opportunities in speaking world. So
That's such
that
an
kept it.
interesting idea too. Like when we're talking about thinking like a leader, that idea of, you drew a line in the sand at your birthday, I think that's beautiful. And, we sometimes, this idea that we'll be happy once a year when we put some candles in some frosting. Like it's totally arbitrary. It's totally made up. I heard Russell Brand of all people give a keynote the other day and said, a changing moment in his life was when he was 15 and they were celebrating Christmas, and he realized he knew nothing about Christ. And this moment he sort of had this spiritual moment where he was like, wow, we celebrate this thing arbitrarily. I know nothing about why. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is I think we have the power in our own brains to decide if we're going to draw a line in the sand like you did on your birthday, or draw a line in the sand and say, hey, I'm actually not going to celebrate something if I have no idea what it means. And I think the power for leaders is to say there, we sulk, we react. I think the idea that I think it's a Churchill quote where it says like, oh, what's the phrase? Like, the the point of it is you're going to react to things, but it's your choice whether you feel it and you stay there forever.
Yeah.
And I think that for us, it's to go, okay, well, we could just slowly, complain and look at everything that's wrong and do nothing and take no action and think about how our business used to be, or think about the opportunities we used to have, or the part of our job we can't do anymore. Or we can flip it around and go, all right, well, every conference in the world just went online. How many of those are looking for speakers? How many speakers are dropped out, don't feel comfortable on camera, don't have a safe internet connection, are in a different time zone so it doesn't work anymore? They were planning on traveling there, but they can't. And so for speakers, I think there's so much opportunity for us. And if you haven't drawn that line in the sand and you're listening today, I think, all right, what if today was the day? I mean, in Australia, what is it, the 26th of May? What if it was the 26th of May was the day you said, just for a week, I'm not going to focus on how it used to be. I'm just going to focus on how it could be. Just a week. And then after a week, if you want to go back to thinking all the things that you missed out on and how life's worse, you can go back to it. But what if, just as a challenge, you said, for the next 7 days, I'm going to take these 7 days, starting today or starting tomorrow, to look at where are the hidden opportunities here? Where are the things that I can do? Whether it's like you're sharing, my friend, maybe it's the time in our life or career that maybe it'd be nice just to not work as much for a month and spend more time with our family. Like, that's an amazing opportunity. What if it is, I've always wanted to take the dust off the bike that's been hanging in the garage and, take it for a spin 4 days a week. Like, what if it's a health thing? What if it's, I actually haven't dealt with my super, or there's that pesky credit card that I'm not really dealing with, or, we need to maybe look at refinancing the house. Maybe now's a good time to, look at that sort of thing. Like, I think there's, whether it's professional opportunities or personal opportunities, as you said on your birthday is a real point. Like, that's such a, with all due respect, and I love it and I honor you for it, it's such an arbitrary date, but it's a powerful one because you give meaning to it. And I think if we could give meaning to a birthday, why can't we give meaning to the 26th of May? Why can't we say today's the day that we're going to go, let's start looking forward? Because at least where we are in Victoria, as of June 1, things take some pretty massive steps to going back to normal.
And I think that's going to be a massive awakening. I put a post on LinkedIn yesterday that was titled, the comeback. It's here.
Yeah.
And I think people are waiting for these dates. And it's funny how humans behave in this situation. They want someone else to tell them, you know what, it's okay to go now. It's okay to have a crack now. We've done lockdown and we've had all our political leaders saying, stay at home, lockdown if you can, blah, blah, blah. They're telling us it's going to be doom and gloom. They're telling us it's going to be tough. Well, you know what? I've got to admit, it hasn't been that tough for me. I work at home already. I've had my family around. I've got my kids still here at school. I've had to do a little bit of tech support for homeschooling, right? That's about it. But I haven't had peak hour traffic. I haven't spent anywhere near as much as I normally spend. So I've probably saved money, but I haven't earned as much. But, it balances each other out. And I think, humans, I think people are really waiting for June 1, and then they're going to wake up again and come back. And they're being told that it's okay. That sort of leads me to another thought as well, is that how do you see, and this is a little bit controversial, so you can dodge it if you like, we're open to open conversations here, is how do you see the leadership of the politicians during this time? I have a really interesting opinion, but I want you to share yours first, and then we'll see if we agree or not, which is okay.
Yeah, totally. So totally out of my depth there with politics. It's not something that I delve into or really talk about too much. I have a model of leadership which I believe in, and I sort of share broadly around that leadership is service, and that was the topic of that second TED talk. And I think you're a leader not because you have a title. I think you're a leader because of what you do. I think you're a leader if you help another person. So if you're listening today, I think you're a leader as much as any leader. If you go out and help someone cross the road, if you see someone at the grocery store who's forgotten their credit card and you swipe through and you pay for their meal, if you send a loved one a message, if you see someone who's, put their heart and soul into a piece of content that they're sharing on Facebook and no one's engaged, and you find one good thing about it and you leave a positive comment, like I think all of those are micro acts of leadership. And when it gets into the big macro leading a nation thing, I just think that it's such an overwhelmingly large task. I think my response to it is empathy, to go, wow, I wouldn't want that job. I don't know how anyone in that job deals with that level of criticism. To be fair, most people seem to put their hand up for it, but I've made a lot of choices in my life where I've said yes to things and then I've been in them and I've had a really hard time. So I've always been appreciative when people have taken a really empathetic approach. And then that being said, I think we're in a time where, there are some really real, there are a lot of really real social challenges that I don't think the mindset of, oh, we'll wait for the government to come and save us, or we'll wait for our boss to make the right call and promote us, or we'll wait for the university to change their funding structure, or we'll wait for our parents to do this. Like, it's a total external locus of control when you say someone else is in charge of my quality of life. And I'm like, I don't believe that. I think I am in charge of, like, I think your life comes from your emotions come from the meaning you give to things, and I get to attribute the meaning I give to things. I get to look at the news and say, whoever the prime minister is this week, I get to say, do I believe they're doing the best job they know how to do, to quote an old Savage Garden song? Or do I believe that they're doing this because they're spiteful, or they're doing this because they're an old white male, or they're doing this because they want to rip off the working person? Like, I get to attribute meaning to things, and I choose to attribute the most positive intent I can to as many things as I can. When I do that, I feel the emotions associated with that meaning. And like, oh, okay, there's a prime minister or a principal or a university or a parent or a teacher. Like, they're just doing the best job they know how to do. How do I feel about that? I'm like, oh, kind of appreciative for what they are doing. What's my quality of life? My inputs are based on the emotions that are people are doing the best job they know how to do. And that's me taking ownership for how I feel, rather than saying, I feel this way because you did this, or they make me do this, which is a pretty extreme position, I'll admit. But for me, looking at everything as, I get to control how I feel about this. Other people don't make me feel things. I make me feel things, has almost more than anything else in my life dramatically changed my quality of life. Just like when you're speaking, like I'm sure you get this, someone gets up and walks out in the middle of a speech. Do you decide that that person hates you, they're judging you, they don't think you're good enough? Do you decide that they're a bad person, that they don't see the value in what you're saying? Or do you go, maybe they've got somewhere to be,
Yeah.
And then when they walk out, you think, oh, maybe they've got something on, or maybe they've got to pick their kid up from school. I can't believe they came to the first 30 minutes of this 90-minute talk, even though they had somewhere to be. Like, what an honor that they'd give me half an hour of their life that they're never going to get back. I appreciate that person. I'd love to see them again. You'll feel differently about experience B rather than experience A. And the reality is, if that person walks out, you'll probably never see them again in your life. So why carry a negative experience from a person who's just doing the best job they know how to do? So that's how I feel about politics.
I think that's a really important point. I was cutting a video of one of my talks that I did just before lockdown in late February, and the cameraman did me a favor and they just sort of left it on a wide shot, and that was fine. And then they had things that they had to go and do. But there was a guy right in front, like the front left frame. He was just on his phone. He's just sitting there on his phone. I'm like, dude, what are you doing on your phone? Then when I've been able to edit it, I look at it and I think he's actually on my website.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, that's okay. But I spent about 2 days sweating on this bloke not paying me any attention.
Wow.
So that's really important, that anyone that's struggling here is listen to what Josh is saying here. You control how you interpret and feel about things. And and I think there's a lot of outside forces that we've sort of surrendered to as children of a mass media era. We let these outside sources, we let talkback radio, we let the news dictate to us how we're meant to be feeling, but that's not how it works. And I know within the first 2 or 3 weeks of this COVID thing, I limited the amount of news that was being played in my house.
It's crucial. You got to do it. It's
Yeah.
non-negotiable.
Yeah, I just said to my wife, I said, "You're on Facebook all the time. You're listening to every politician's live stream on Facebook about what's going on. They're just point scoring. It's not going to affect us locked away in our house. Give yourself 15 minutes every night once the kids have gone to bed to get the information that you need, because you're a school teacher, so you need to know when you're going back or not, and then just move on with your life and enjoy the situation you're in." And yeah,
How'd she respond to that? What did your wife say?
yes, like she adopted it, and there was the marked reduction in stress.
That's awesome.
She was spending, rather than spending every hour getting stressed, even in just spikes of 1 or 2 minutes, she was just getting one spike, being able to talk to me about it directly, because there was no kids around. The kids were in bed, so it was just me, and I would know when she was on, so I was ready to help her decompress, I suppose, and it was great. It's worked really well.
And what a thing right now, I mean, my mum was a school teacher for 40 years. My auntie's a school teacher. It really kind of runs through our family. Like, if ever there was a time that we're starting to appreciate the amount of work it takes to look after kids when parents have got their kids at home, So, I mean, if nothing else, a huge shout out to any school teachers who are listening, because, we get to do the fun stuff of be a public speaker, and stand in front of crowds and have the spotlight and the bio, whereas teachers are doing it all over the world every day. And I think there's something to be said for a market increase in the appreciation for that amongst many professions.
Yeah,
So
nurses, all these people
man,
have stepped up.
100%.
I mean, they're not getting paid anymore for the work they're doing. Let's
Nope.
understand that. If you or I were asked, "Hey, come and be a public speaker for 6 weeks straight every day,"
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, you'd add a zero,
ching,
wouldn't you?
ching. But these
Exactly.
guys, no, they're not getting anything, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So my wife, she went back. She's got kids back in class today for the first day.
Wow.
So she does the little ones, and there's so many things that are different. All the desks have had to be spaced out. The kids aren't allowed to sit on the floor. If they touch any books, they've got to be disinfected.
Yeah, wow.
You got to have all the windows open in the classrooms. So, and no heater. So they'll be,
Wow.
they're doing it different, and good luck to them. Josh, there was something you mentioned before we came on air, and I think it sort of ties in a bit to how we've seen our premier, and I don't want to make this too political, but I think he's a really interesting case study, is Dan Andrews. Now, I'm a swinging voter. I don't lean one way or the other. I vote on merit, if I vote at all, to be honest. But he came out really strong. He came out in this thing really strong. He said, right, this is what we're doing. We're going into a state of emergency. We're not going to assess anything until mid-May. You'll hear more about us from them, but until that time, these are the things you're allowed to do and not do. And he stuck by it despite all the criticism. He just went bang. Yet we saw other politicians in other states, oh yeah, we might be able to ease this, or we might be able to ease that, or we might be able to do this. And they were shifting the deck chairs, I suppose, a lot more. What do you think about that? And I suppose it ties into this whole certainty and how humans respond to it.
Yeah, so I mean, the idea of, I think it's a really interesting idea at a high level. The principle of that is, what I'm hearing is, if you make a decision, should you stick with it? And then how do you deal with feedback and criticism and sticking to your guns? So that is a kind of concept. I mean, the analogy I see here a lot is, maybe in the speaker world, people pigeonhole themselves and they say, I speak about this. And then someone gives you an opportunity to go over here and you say, well, do I go this way? Or this is my view on leadership, or whatever it is. And people go, well, have you considered this? And what's the I don't know, the thought process behind going off a path? In the university space, as we both know, it's, students enroll in a degree, and then after 3.5 years of a degree, they're like, do you love what you do? They're like, no. Do you like what you do? Not really. Do you know what career path this could open up? Not exactly. And they sort of stick to this relatively arbitrary decision of to pick a certain degree and to commit to it for 4 years.
And you're a great example, because you studied engineering.
Yeah, I studied civil engineering, and then I changed. And that for me was, and that's probably a great way to answer that question, is I left uni, did engineering for a year, and I said, I'm doing this, got pulled into this grad program. And I was like, radio, I'm going to do this grad program. And then I left and changed. But during that program, I'd committed to it and I committed to a portion of work on this site. And so I said, okay, what can I control? Well, I need to do, it was something, I can't remember, like 100 modules, little personal reflections on different parts of what it is to be an engineer. And I had to do 100 modules to be eligible for a promotion from a grad engineer to a site engineer. And in the engineering world, everything's very like title based and your pay ranks are based on that and blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, well, what can I control? Well, I've got to do these 100 modules. That's not up for debate. Well, how quickly can I do these modules? And I was like, well, if I, they take about an hour or so to do each. What if I came in an hour early? And bear in mind, I used to work 6:30 in the morning till 5 o'clock at night. And I used to get a lot of flack for leaving at 5, but it was a principle of mine. So I started coming in at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, and I banged out these 100 modules, and I did the grad program in half the time. And for me, that was like, I committed to this thing. I wanted to get all the lessons. I wanted to do the work, but I also wanted to do it. Like, autonomy is a big thing for me. Hence why I like running my own business, is I like to have control over how I do things, which satisfies both a need for like certainty and a need for variety. So for me, it was do this thing that I've committed to, pull the levers I can to do it as efficiently as I possibly can, meet my commitments to everybody else, but then also make sure that I'm enjoying the process along the way and I'm being challenged. And where I think my most empathetic point of view to anything political is you're so public facing and all your decisions are constantly up for 2 cents on the news or the radio. And the best thing would be the best thing for the news cycle would be for something to go horribly, horribly wrong. And I think like what a horrible position to have to be in. And that's why I picked a career that's so positive, that's all around leadership. And students, where they have quite a positive and optimistic mindset, is I can go to people who are in a degree or in a career pathway and they've committed to this thing, and I'm like, hey, all the things you guys can control along this 4 whatever year journey is what you do outside the classroom. It's what you do in your extra hours when you're not studying or when you're not in class. So when someone makes a decision in a public setting that's up for debate, I mean, it's COVID-19. We've never, by the nature of 19, it was from 2019. That's where the 19 bit comes from. But like, no one's ever faced it before. No one knows how to handle it. And I think that we can sit back and we can post game who did it best and worst. But the cover of the Wall Street Journal this week, as I was against this at the start, but as painful as the economic impact has been on so many people, like, to not have 100,000 people dead, or even, America's an order of magnitude bigger than us. If we take a zero off the end, to not have 10,000 people dead, or even 1,000 people dead, even though, economists can debate the long-term impact of that, I think just purely from a state of, I think different states did the best job they knew how to do, as much as I can tell. But yeah, I don't know what I would have done if I was in that position.
Yeah, I don't think we can judge people for what they've done. And I think there's going to be a lot of hindsight. But
yep,
yeah, when you're experiencing something for the first time, hindsight's irrelevant. All you can do is learn from it. But you were saying something to me earlier about uncertainty leads to fear.
Yeah,
and I think that I think in the speaking world, that's what's challenging a lot of people. They don't know. People say to me all the time, "What date do you reckon speaking events are going to come back online? What date do you think we're going to be able to travel interstate?" And that's all uncertainty, and that's creating the fear. And it's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. It's out of your control. Focus on what can you do in the next couple of days. A friend of mine, and I mention him every episode because he was the first guest on the show, Rick Rushton.
Good on him.
He said,
what was his name? Sorry, I was just saying good on him. Rick Rushton. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and he says on. Sorry, I set Siri off somehow doing that. Rick Rushton must be listening to everything I say. He says it's like driving your car at night. Only worry about what you can see in the headlights. Nothing else matters.
I like that. That's good. Yeah, definitely. And that idea of the uncertainty and the unknown, fear. And I take this from the work of Susan David, who's a Harvard psychologist. Amazing. Wrote a book on emotional agility, and did a really good TED talk on sort of grit and resilience too. One of the concepts that I was sharing with you earlier was this idea that fear, when there's uncertainty, fear rushes in to fill the gap. So you don't know if you're going to be fired or not. Fear rushes in. You get a text from your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife that says, "We need to talk." Fear rushes in. And as a side note, stop sending those text messages. Add an emoji. Let people know it's okay. It's unnecessary stress in these times. You know, if you don't know what's happening with the bank, if you've got stocks, if you don't know what's going on with your super, your clients, your conferences, things are put on hold. Fear rushes in to fill that gap. And the metaphor I like to use with students is I say, bring your cup of fear to me, pour it out on the desk in front of us, and let's just both look at it and examine that fear. And then when you leave that meeting with me, I want you to leave with, if not a fully empty cup, a much less full cup. Because you'll go out in the world and then something else will happen and some more fear will fit in. But if that just stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks, and all of a sudden you don't know what's happening in your relationship or your finances or your physical health or your job, or a million other things, the dominoes can start to fall. And so on the idea of speakers, like if speakers are listening, you want something practical to do today. I mean, I've been really busy, fortunately, but if I'd lost my interstate travel, for example, it's, as you've just said, your wife is back at school, it's 1:47. So the school day doesn't stop for another hour and a half. I would Google schools in whatever suburb you're in. I would find 20 schools in the local area, and I'd send all of them a message and say, hey, I'm a speaker. Here's a couple of clips of what I do. I've got some downtime. I'd love to come in and share my message about whatever you talk about with your students. No cost, totally on the house. I just love to come in and address them. And if your students are online, I'll do a webinar. I'll stream in, put me up on the screen. It'll be, you know, it'll be like the geography teacher wheeling in the big set on the TV and putting on Shrek to watch on a rainy day. Except hopefully this face is a little less green. But like, you could do that, message 20 schools. And I think this is just how the universe works. Like Johnny, who's in year 11, who has a speaker come in and talk about whatever, leadership, careers, personal branding, you know, whatever it is. Johnny's dad's the CEO of CommBank. And Johnny comes home and sits at the dining room table with his dad and says, or his mom or his whoever, and says, you know, what did you do at school today? And Johnny's like, well, you know, it's pretty boring. But then we had this guy stream in and he was talking about whatever it is, you know. It was pretty interesting. And his dad's or his mum's like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What was that guy's name again? And just like your fella in the front row brings out their phone, or a little bit later goes to the website. And then the next thing you know, when there's a hiring thing or there's a team building or there's a new financial year, who's the speaker that CEO calls to come in and address their team?
Yeah.
And I just think that's how the world actually works. And there's so much serendipity and there's so much that comes back to you if you give and put good vibes into the world that, yeah, you're not going to charge your local school 10 grand for you to give a talk. But if you do a company offsite for the CommBank, you might. And even if it's not for brand building or lead generation or anything like that, I just think like if you've got something worth sharing to people you consider important, high power, people who can pay to sit in front of you or pay for your webinar or pay for your talk or pay for your conference, like surely that stuff is worth sharing with school kids. Yeah. And there are heaps of schools and teachers who could do with a break right now. And what if speakers said, you know what, I'm going to voluntarily bear the load of one local school teacher for just half an hour once in the next month. Yeah. I'll just do one good thing. And then all of a sudden you speak at schools, and then then you're at a teachers conference and the principal brings you in. Like, I think it just, for me, and that's how it all started with building my business. I went and just spoke to tons of students and did heaps of free stuff for student clubs. And eventually that trickled up and they were telling the staff members like, hey, this guy's pretty good. Like, you should think about bringing him in. And I had a meeting with one staff member who said, who brought me in for a meeting. I remember walking into the room with her and she said, I've got no idea who you are, but 3 people have mentioned your name to me. She's like, so what do you do? And it was like the best start to a meeting ever, because she was the client ultimately. And she's like, my job is to help my students, and they're telling me they want you. Like, why? I was like, well, this is what I believe, and this is what I do, and here's how I think it could be helpful. And they're still a client today, years later. But
it's easy. It's easy when they ask those questions.
Mate, it is. And that's one of those things people listen to, oh, well, yeah, you know, if every client was like that. Well, like, what are you doing to help your clients ask those questions?
Yeah.
And what do you know, the conferences, all the TED Talks all around the world that have all had to go virtual and the speakers have dropped out or whatever. Like, are we reaching out as speakers and are we messaging? Are we offering our time? You know, is there a nonprofit in the area and you're a marketing expert that you could message and say, hey, I'll do a lunch and learn for your team. Like, you want to raise money, you want to market, it's all the same principles. Like, I'll just do a lunch and learn for you. Like, do 10 lunch and learns, speak at 10 schools, DM 10 conferences around the world, DM 10 TEDx events that are running. I don't know, where else could people go? DM 10, you know, local businesses and just offer your expertise just because they're in your neighborhood. And out of those 50 opportunities, I would eat my hat or my coffee cup if none of them came back in a fruitful way in the next 12 months.
Oh,
You
I
can do that in
agree.
a couple of hours.
Even your local councils,
Local
who run business
council.
groups.
Mate, exactly. It's like you've got to, we touched on that sort of politics thing before. It's like, okay, well, let's find out whatever initiatives those are. What are we supporting? And then let's share some expertise. Like if your state's reopening cafes on Monday, as a speaker, if you're a marketing guru, what are 10 tips that every local cafe should use to run their first Facebook ad?
Yeah.
What are 10 tips that they can do to do whatever your expertise is in and put that stuff out. Like mine's leadership in the university space, and we ran 83 online events. So I flipped my business overnight. Like now we do online events, we ran 83 online events since the 20th of March. So in 2 months.
Great job.
And I think that, thank you. And I think that one of the things I put out a guide yesterday, 20 lessons I learned from running those events on LinkedIn for free. Here are the things, how you apply it. Here's how you use Slido and Kahoot and Google Sheets and all these different things. And I just took all my lessons and put it out for free. And, someone could use that and start a rival business. But I think what will actually happen is, I got a message today from someone who said, like less than 24 hours later, who said, hey, we'd love to run some staff training on how to run engaging online events. Almost word for word, the heading of the PDF guide I put out yesterday. And it took me a couple of hours on Canva to whip it up, but Canva's free.
Yeah, and Canva's awesome.
Canva's amazing,
Yeah.
It's Aussie startup. Like, I think I think Canva ethos is what I'm saying here. Canva, that freemium model, here's so much stuff for free. It's enough to help some of you. But then the people who go in and buy the premium license, well, it's $1 billion company, is they give 90% of it away for free. But the ones who want that last 10% are also willing to pay for it. And I think that's similar to speakers. Like, look how much great free content you put out and the world of speakers put out. And yeah, you hold back a little bit because you need to have your expertise, but I think we can just give way more than we think we can. And I think scarcity and fear and uncertainty of, will someone rip me off? Will someone not hire me? Will someone take my content? Like, Google's free. Google knows a whole lot more than we do.
Yeah, I think you've struck some chords there. I just launched a free mini course this week.
Cool.
I think yesterday, to be honest.
What's it about?
It's about how to make kick-ass videos. So how to let the world know that you're back in business. We said it earlier. The best way to drive business is let people know you're still in business.
Yeah.
And if you own a phone, you can make videos, and that's what this course is about. It's not about going and paying a big production company. It's not about going and spending $10,000 on a video. It's about how do you tell your story and connect that's just as effective as spending all the money, but do it yourself. And
100.
It's all about helping. And I think COVID, and we've still got a few months of it to go, is a great time to sharpen your tools.
100%. I've got where is it? 7th habit right there, Like, it's sharpen the saw at the end of Stephen Covey. Like, it's sharpening up those tools. I think that's very true.
Sharpen up those tools, guys. Now, just finally, before we wrap this up, Josh, because you've been very generous with your time, how is it that a boy from the Gold Coast who then went to country New South Wales ends up in Melbourne with 2 TEDx's under his belt? You probably got another 2 or 3 to go before you get bored of them. Influencing young leaders of universities, potentially, and usually more often than not, the next leaders of society come out of university leadership positions.
I couldn't agree more, and that's my ethos. So you shared before a beautiful quote. Was it from your grandmother or your grandfather?
Grandfather, work works.
Work works. So my granddad, who I never got to meet on my mum's side, always used to say, if not you, then who? Yeah. And I love that. And I think it's, I think a couple of generations ago, they were onto a couple of things. And I think it's because they saw real hardship. A couple of world wars will do that to you, or a world war in Vietnam will do that to you, I think. So for me, I was just so blessed to have all the opportunities that I did have. And going back to that ethos of, if not you, then who? I spent a little bit of time traveling as I was trying to figure out my career, and there was this beautiful quote I think it's misattributed to Edmund Burke that says, all it takes for the perseverance or the triumph of evil is for good men or good people to do nothing. And so I sort of read that quote, and I'm a big collector of quotes, and I like to mesh them together. And my favorite thing is when they contradict, because I think that's where all the beauty is. And when this sort of said evil, it basically says, if you take the Edmund Burke bit, evil will triumph unless good people do nothing. If good people do nothing.
Yeah.
And so the question there is, do you consider yourself a good person? Well, I hope so. Great. Are you doing anything about the problems you're complaining about all day? And if the answer to that is no, then like, who are you? And then my grandfather's quote, if not you, then who? Who are you expecting was going to come along and solve this? So I think this idea of we blame the boss, we blame the government, we blame the union, we blame the tax office, we blame the whatever. I think honestly, that comes down to a lot of, well, we're not actually doing anything about the problem that we're really mad about. And that was true for me. And I just like someone else to deal with it. And one of the biggest unlock for me, like going from Gold Coast to Orange to the city to traveling to doing what I do now, is I want to show young people that they don't need to solve the whole problem and that the best place to start is with themselves. And if they can move themselves to action, like we were saying earlier, make, create, do something, that little shift in momentum is enough to start chipping away at the problem. And, like a little drop of water will slowly chip away at a rock. I think it's very much the size of the drop, not the size of the bucket that counts. And if everyone could drop another drop onto some of these rocks or some of these big social problems, we'd wear them down and we'd break them apart. Just like all the big social changes that have happened through time, whether it be slavery or women's rights or gender equality or sexual equality and all those things that are still in progress. It's individual people doing little actions day by day that build and build and build. And so what I'm super passionate about is getting students not to wait until they're retired and 65 to give away some money to charity and that be how we do good in the world, but say, no, find a problem you care about, find a problem you get angry about, and either speak about it, make videos about it, post about it, but like do something in the real world about it. Help one person, and then help one more, and then one more, and one more, and eventually it stacks up. And for me, it was really interesting on the just as a random side note, the campus consultancy page, our sort of socials. I grew it on LinkedIn. We hit about 2,000 followers only after we'd helped 10,000 students.
Wow.
And so if I was to go back and say, okay, for every follower, you have to help 5 people. That's 5 people physically or virtually in a workshop.
That's hard to get them likes.
It's hard to get them likes, right? But like, that's the whole point of like, oh, we're not going for them. And like that, I don't spend $1 on that advertising, but it's come after the good. And I think everyone's like, oh, I want that vanity metric. And then when I have enough followers, I'll start doing good, or I'll start sharing, or I'll start giving. I'm like, it's backwards. I think it's do the good in the world, and then all that material stuff comes.
And then it becomes just a mathematical formula.
I think it does after that point.
Yeah,
like, yeah, it's pretty easy for me. It's like if I want to share my message with 20,000 LinkedIn followers, I have to help 100,000 people. It's like, what am I more excited about? A couple of zeros on a screen or working with 100,000 people?
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer once you've felt it. What you were saying, it's about connection. Once you've felt it, that other stuff like dollars in a bank account or logos on a screen or like social impressions, like, it doesn't mean anything. It's the human in front of you. And so, yeah, I'm obsessed with when I have a human in front of me and they're giving me some of their precious time, that I'm appreciative of it, that I try to give them something tangible and valuable that they can use. But also that I really know that this is as good as life gets. It's impacting another human in a positive way, not all the surface stuff. Yeah.
It's incredible. I'm into story loops, right? So my whole thing is I study storytelling frameworks. I study how the human brain interacts with them. When do they disconnect? Don't disconnect in terms of, when people use them for marketing and whatever.
Yep.
I've got one with you, and so I'm going to raise it. Is what's the disconnect from, because I come from a family of 2 types of people.
Yeah.
The male.
And Jonathan, I only want to jump in quickly. I'm going to have to run in about 30 seconds.
Right, we're going to go.
I'm sorry that you're about to jump into something.
I've got a family of engineers and teachers.
Yes.
I know what engineers are like. You started as an engineer and now you're doing this. When was that moment? What was it that switched you?
So, I don't think there was a moment as much as I think of it more instead of a light bulb as a string of lights. And I just had a lot of these little moments. And I think that the thing that helped me do that was just staying curious. I just challenged everything. I questioned. I said, is there a better way to do this? Am I doing something that I'll be proud of when I'm older? And I just never stopped asking questions. So I think for people, rather than the decision is, if you're doing something you don't like right now, does it make sense to do that for another 40 years? And if the answer is no, that's okay. You don't need to know what else you're going to do, but just know that the answer to that question, am I happy doing what I'm doing, is no. And within that no is a whole bunch of opportunity to explore alternatives.
Keep
And
an
I just
open
say,
mind.
keep an open mind, be curious, look around, and shoot us a message on how you go with your journey, and we'd love to support you.
Mate, thank you so much for being on the show. I know I've taken up way too much of your time. There's one
Not at
last
all.
thing we do on this show, and that is the guest gets to choose the next guest.
Cool. The guest gets to choose the next guest. Do I have to decide right now?
If you want or if you don't, we can wait. We can make an announcement if you want. I
Um,
know you got to rush, so I won't put any pressure on you.
yeah, let me get back to you if that's
Get
all
back
right.
to
Stay
me.
tuned for a follow up, and I'll send you who the next guest should be. I
Mate,
love it.
awesome. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it. Absolutely plenty of gold in there. I think
Thanks,
if
mate.
people aren't going out there and doing their 10, 10, 10, 10, 10 by 5, that's really going to spark your business. No doubt about it. No matter what business you're in. Reach
I think
out,
so.
connect. It all comes back. Thank you, mate. You've been a champion. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, mate. Lovely speaking with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Cheers.
Bye all.